Alright, welcome to this first video concerning our week 1 activities. This is going to be about the opening worksheet subtitled Obama for President Obama. And we are going to work through this together a little bit. I'm just going to try to answer some questions. So your goal as you go through these worksheets is to try to work through them on your own. Right, and then come back and see, all right, what questions do I have? Do these videos help fill in those questions and answer those questions? I'm very new to this recording process. I dislike it immensely already. So we'll do our best to sort of work through, and I'll try to be as engaging as possible. So turn on some music. It really, I really hinders my ability that I can't write in front of you. The software doesn't seem to work with the document camera, so we're going to do our best to keep it active and engaging. So let's just jump right in. Quantitative literacy. This first activity is just looking at quantitative literacy, what we mean by that, and what I mean when I say we want to develop the ability and inclination to question numbers. All right, we're going to work through just two basic examples, give you some examples of discussion questions that can go towards our content discussion as opposed to the article discussion, and just sort of give us some examples there. So this first example, all right, let's say we sit on the board of directors at a hospital, right, and we're reviewing the hospital's performance throughout the year, staff's performance, etc. And so a hospital administrator comes to us and says that 90% of patients who spend the night check out within a week, right? Seemingly good statistic, right? However, the nurses come and say that 80% of the patients who stayed last night have actually been there for over a year, right? So those patients have not, right, healed, who have not left their beds, that sort of thing. So the question is, can they both be right? If so, how? So take a second, feel free to pause the video and really try to think through what's if these two items can coexist, these two statements can coexist. All right, so if you're done pausing it, all right, I'm going to just quickly talk about how they can both be right and just sort of see why we care. So for example, I will have notes, some handwritten notes over here, and I'm going to try to edit this thing as we go to give us some meaningful notes as well. So let's say we've got, that worked? All right. Let's say we've got these 10 rooms. There should be 10 rooms there. All right, and I filled in 8 of them as red and 2 of them as green. All right, so what they represent, if they represent the rooms filled with patients over the course of, any night at our hospital, what we could have here is that, let's say these 8 rooms, all right, if we have 10 rooms total, all right, these 8 rooms have patients that have stayed there over a year. Right? Those patients have not left their hospital rooms. They've been there every night for the past year. Right? Well, then what the nurses are saying here is true. Right? 80% of patients who stayed last night have been there over a year. Right? That is a true statement. Okay? However, now as we go day to day, all right, these 2 rooms, let's say, change over quickly. All right? They might change over multiple times per day, but even people who stay there overnight, let's say they're staying there in 1 night, 2 night stays at most, these other remaining 20% of our rooms, we're just using 2 out of 10 here in our example, are changing over very quickly. So over time, over the course of a year, 365 days, all right, you might have many people coming through those rooms. In fact, the people that come through those rooms will end up making a larger portion of the total of patients we see throughout the year than these ones. Because these ones are not changing. Right? These rooms are not changing over, whereas multiple patients are coming through here. In fact, if we have 92, for example, let's say over the course of the year we get 92 patients moving through, I gotta select the right thing, moving through these rooms, right? And we've got 8 people, right, staying in these rooms. All right. Then over the course of the year, right, if all of these patients moving through these rooms checked out within a week, all right, and all of these patients, right, were there for over a whole year, both of these statements that we started with are actually true. Right? In other words, the administrator says that 90% of patients who spend the night check out within a week. Well, that's true over the course of the year, right? In fact, in this case, 92% of the patients who spent the night at the hospital, right, checked out within a week. Right? However, the nurses said that 80% of patients who stayed last night, take that snapshot, last night, have been there for over a year. Well, that would be true as well. 8 out of the 10, right, patients who stayed there the last night or any night, right, were actually there for over a year. So both can be right. So here's the question, and this is where we go from just talking about some interesting mathematical problems to getting into real world issues and of injustice and that sort of stuff. Is I ask here, why are both statements important? Right? Why are both statements important? Right? And why might both sides care about how the information is presented? All right, so notice that we've got potential for them to be drawing on the same data and say very different things. So this is a good example of something you could respond to in the content area of our discussion board. All right, you could also ask for clarification on something. You could ask where I got some sort of data. You could ask other students. All right, the goal is to foster some discussion. So why don't you go ahead, pause the video, make sure you really understand this before we go on and look at the second question. All right, so I'm going to move on to the second question here, our second scenario. It says, in one of the 2008 presidential debates, the following exchange took place between then Senators McCain and Obama. Right? So Senator McCain said that then Senator Obama's secret that you don't know is that his tax increases will increase taxes on 50% of small business revenue. Right? And Obama countered, only a few percent of small businesses make more than $250,000 a year. So the vast majority of small businesses would get a tax cut under my plan. 98%, in fact, make less than that $250,000 mark. So the question is, can we reconcile these statements, or is one of them lying? So again, please pause the video, take a minute, and try to reconcile these two statements. Right? Does one of them have to be lying, or can they really be talking about the same sort of data and come up with such drastic, seemingly conflicting statements? All right, so as you may hopefully have worked through or been able to had some intuition about, they can technically both be correct. Right? And so the key is in their language. All right, the subtlety in their language allows for this sort of nuance, because they're talking about the same sort of things, but not in the same way, not truly citing the same sort of statistics. So, for example, Senator McCain, I'm going to switch over here to some of the written notes because I think I like this better. All right, Senator McCain is referring to small business revenue and says that President Obama's tax cut for small businesses and the new tax reform for small businesses would tax 50% of small business revenue. And that may, in fact, be true. All right, as President Obama counters, 2% of small businesses make over that $250,000 profit mark per year. Right? So that 2% of actual small businesses, that small sliver of the total number of small businesses, accounts for 50% of the small business revenue, which Senator McCain is referring to. Right? So again, that's what I say right here. Right? Those are the ones making over that threshold. Right? This threshold that President or then Senator Obama refers to. Right? So they truly are talking about the same data, but they're looking at things in very different ways. Right? Senator McCain is posing that most of, or at least half of, small business revenue will be taxed, whereas President Obama looks at it as the individual businesses that are being taxed happen to be the ones that can afford to be taxed, given that they make a certain amount of profit per year. Right? So again, a good question and a nice type of discussion question before we go on to this last one is, all right, why are both of these individuals pushing things in a certain way. And it might seem fairly obvious here in terms of they have some sort of agenda and they're tied to some sort of tax reform plan. Right? So taking this, I'll call it art, and I'll try not to use the word BS, but a lot of times what we need to do, right, what we really should be compelled to do is to sift through some of the BS, right, and sift through some of the issues that misrepresentation or different representations of data, quantitative information, can pose. In other words, they can push certain agendas. So the second discussion question that I'll pose for content purposes is, what's a math-related takeaway from this introduction? All right, so a takeaway from this introduction along the lines of, developing ability and inclination to question numbers. Have you seen similar uses of mathematical information? Have you seen this type of sort of two different views of the same thing being propagated before? And then just what do you think the goal of this activity is? All right, some of those questions are a little lighter than others, but the idea is I want you to be thinking about what is the goal of each of these activities as we work through things. Why is Brad making me do this? All right, so there were no definitions, for example, here. All right, what are we really trying to push? What am I trying to get you to do on your own? All right, so that is all for this video. I will come back with a new one later on in terms of proportionism and looking at lineocentrism.